What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. This is part two of Deep Space Nine's pilot, Emissary. So, if you missed the first half of Emissary, you missed us talking about a lot of nonsense. So,
Mhm.
hop on back and watch part one. But if you have, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed it, please, do the like and subscribe and notification thing. It really, really helps us. We really enjoy doing this, but that helps us, eat as a result of it. So, very quickly to recap, right? Cisco's there. He's on a fetch quest to get to find the Celestial Temple. We've met a bunch of folks. We're here watching on Sunday, January 3rd, 1993. We're listening to I Will Always Love You. And this episode continued to be directed, as this is part two, continued to be directed by David Carson and was written by Rick Berman and Michael Piller. And so, very quickly, I got three more pieces of fun trivia here before we continue talking about the episode. And this is an interesting one involving spoilers. This is the only episode of Deep Space Nine where the wormhole does not appear in the opening credits because it was a major spoiler. So,
Mm.
so all subsequent credits will feature the wormhole, but this one did not. And I mentioned this before in the part one, but this episode features a complete rewrite of the Trill species. And we talked about how the memories were shared and this, that, the other thing, but also they did a redesign of the prosthetics, the facial prosthetics that you see on the next generation, as well as the symbiote itself looks different. But they went from prosthetics to spots because it's Terry Farrell. You want to put prosthetics on her? No, you want
Right.
to throw some spots on there. It was I think makes a lot of sense because why would you want to do all that? So the last piece of trivia is this was one of the most expensive pilots of all time at the time, which was is a $12 million budget in 1993. So today, that's $23 million in today's dollars for a budget. Now, of course, in this day of Disney Plus, Marvel series, it doesn't seem like a lot. But then, it was a syndicated show. This did not broadcast on any of the networks, any of the major networks. It wasn't a CBS show or an NBC show like it was before and later. This was syndicated. So it sort of aired whenever whatever channel bought it. For me, it aired on Saturday nights, I believe, in Vermont on ABC 22, which was our local network there. But the budget was half of the budget of Star Trek 6,
The
a
movie?
feature film. Yes.
Wow.
So, and they spent $2 million on sets alone, which is a huge amount of money. Which, of course, you had to build the sets for the whole rest of the series, but you can see it because it on screen that they put a huge amount of money into this series. So, Mike, are you excited to get to part two?
I am Keith. There's orbs. We got to figure out what the orbs have to do with
Mhm.
anything. The orbs seem to be coming from one spot, so we got to sneak away using some Odo magic to get the head start, the jump to this
Mhm.
cluster. So we got to see where we go from here.
Let's go see if we can find the Celestial Temple here in our screening room. Let's take a look at Emissary Part 2. So, this is Act 5 of the two-part episodes, where we see Cisco and Dax head off in a runabout to try and find the Celestial Temple. Temple. Second time I've done that. And boom, they get sucked into a crazy tunnel of light. Actually, you know what? You can see some shots here of the inside of the runabout,
Which is cool.
which it's another set, right? So they had to have the big set for their shuttle, which you only see on one episode of Next Generation. But here we are, boom, CGI from 1993, and we're sucked into this tunnel. And as Terry Farrell shows off spouting technobabble with a straight face, they go through the tunnel and they exit it and discover. I mean, look, these effects, they look pretty silly for today, but for 93, this was big doings. And you can see what they had to, practical effects, right? They're in a set, they've got a green screen behind the shuttle there, and they don't have the shuttle on a gimbal. They're tilting the camera back and forth. And, there's plenty of Star Trek lore about the shaking and this, that, the other thing. And you shake the camera and have the actors shake. And, they've been doing it the same way since the 60s. So we hop out.
It was fun to just hear them say technobabble, 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 wormhole.
Wormhole.
All right, I got that one.
Well, we discover that they went through a wormhole, which is a really big deal. It's a black hole that goes out both sides, and they're able to travel great distances. And they find out, boom again, that they have gone all the way to the Gamma Quadrant, 80,000 light years away, which that's 80,000 years at the speed of light, which is, I don't know if you know, that's very far away. I almost did Trump. I don't know if you know, it's very far away. It's, it's very far. It's very far. Anyway, it's a wormhole, and it's the first stable wormhole they've ever seen. So it is not only able to transport them 80,000 light years away, which is 100 years at warp 9 or whatever it is. It's also stable. So it's a really big deal for the entire Federation, for the whole quadrant. This is a big deal.
So they got to test it, Keith. That's why they do the U-turn, right? And they're like, well, let's just make sure we can get our asses back.
Uncharacteristically wisely for Starfleet officers, they turn right around and go home. But
they try to.
So Mike, does the implications of a wormhole dawn on you here? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking, in fact, I took a note. I was trying to remember when Stargate came out, because I was like, wasn't that was kind of the premise of Stargate, right? They're like, oh, we found this passage that can beam us somewhere else. So the idea of that in a Star Trek universe is awesome, because that's a lot of opportunity to zip zop across the galaxy or across the universe. And my thoughts actually were exactly what I said before. It was a lot of like technobabble, wormhole. Here's all the exposition you need in a very short period of time. But that's TV. I was cool with it. So now I want to know. Obviously, the next question is, does this lead us to the orb chamber? Let's find out.
Let's find out. Well, so they go home, but their ship is mysteriously stopped, and they're forced to land on a misery dark lightning planet. So here they land in the middle of a wormhole, which is super weird. And Cisco goes out, and it's it's planet hell. They've got
Is it though? Is it planet hell?
Is it though? Because guess what? Dax experiences it as the same park that they keep shooting a million away missions on. Including they go to the nice planet where it's the same one where they go to the nice planet with a bunch of nudists try to execute Wesley. Yeah, season 1 of Next Gen. We all know it. But then the pesky orb shows up and scans them, and Dax is zapped away, and Cisco is sucked into white nothingness that omnipotent beings love to zap you to. So what are you thinking here, Mike?
Well, I don't know. In your recap, I don't know if we're to the part where it's cool, but in the beginning, obviously, I think it's cool that we're getting different experiences, because clearly the orb power that we saw when we first were investigating the orb is here. Is the orb, is it like advanced tech? Is it a being? Is it a person? Is it a thing? We don't know quite yet, but I think we're about to find out through our conduit here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things. I don't quite know what they're seeing different, versions of this means. I don't like it. It was kind of like a cool idea that they came up, but I don't think they finished writing that idea. So it was like let's show off our cool green screen effects.
Oh, that's interesting. I kind of saw it a different way. My takeaway was that since they seem to infer their communication, audiovisual communication, via your sort of consciousness or your memories. I just figured he was in a dark place kind of in here, so he saw a dark reality, and she had a more sort of stable Zen kind of thing.
That's great. Wow. No, hey, you know what? Mike just got an A on the term paper, understanding the subtext that dumb me never picked up on after
No,
all of
you
these
picked up.
years.
You just thought it was we wanted to show off our cool green screen effects.
You can see where my subconscious lives today.
Keith, like my key out sucks.
Mike, yes, yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not happy with it.
I'm not happy with my key out.
So you would see a lightning. You would probably your perception would have probably been a giant green screen room.
It's probably would have like where I could never get the key right. Yeah, that's probably exactly right. Yeah, well that's cool. I love the effect you can see behind us here of like the earth cracking and opening him up. Like that's a pretty cool effect. And
my question though is where does Dax go? Like when he now is having this well, for all we know, this all happened like a hot second, right?
That's right. I mean, lots of different things. You know, we're gonna find out more about where Dax goes, but because the orb, so he goes to the omnipotent place, and he starts talking to folks. Oh, I didn't do this in the screenshot, but the orb zooms out of the wormhole, and Kira and O'Brien beam it aboard the station. Despite the station being very far away from the wormhole, this will matter later, but we're going to ignore the range of a transporter. And it turns out the orb was bringing Dax back to the station so Cisco could have a conversation with some sort of alien creatures speaking through people in his memories, which is what we're seeing here. He's sort of having these hallucinations of people from his life trying to communicate with him through these alien folks. Now, back on the station.
Or vice versa, right? Like the alien or the being, I just kept calling it a being because it's not really defined if it's what it is at the point. It's a consciousness, but anyway, they can't speak the language, so they use your memories,
yeah,
to communicate to you. Yeah, that was cool.
That's right.
In fact, the Transformers stole it, and so did a lot of like sci-fi. Steals that idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very cool idea that they're sort of like telepathic and get into your brain and your past and present and future, and we'll get into all the time lord of it all. But back at the station, Dax tells everyone about the wormhole. They realized that a stable wormhole is a big freaking deal, and that the Cardassians are gonna want it too. They hatch a crazy plan, Mike, to move the giant station from the orbit of Bajor to the mouth of the wormhole. Did you understand what they were trying to do here?
No. In fact, I almost forget this scene entirely. All I remember from this beat is like the Kardashians like go. They like figure it out and they beam off to try to get them to get there.
Yes. So, they're only able to sabotage it for a little second, but the implications of what this wormhole means to Bajor, right? Because it's basically they've opened up a tunnel across the river to Manhattan, right? And who owns the tunnel is a big deal. So that the tunnel goes all the way to the Gamma Quadrant, which means there's going to be a whole bunch of other species and civilizations and trade, and it's going to be a hub of the entire quadrant. So it's very important who owns that hub. So the Cardassians are going to want it too, right? And so what they want to do is get the station there to sort of plant the flag and claim this wormhole for Bajor, right? So it's very, very important that it's like planting the flag on the moon. Who gets there first gets to own this momentously important thing. And for Bajor, a planet that's been occupied, that's poor, that's just getting itself together, it's a huge deal. And for the Federation, it's a huge deal to have control over the wormhole. So they pick up Bashir and march to the promenade to show Paramount all the money they spent on the set wasn't wasted. And in this, we learn an interesting piece of information, Mike, that we learn that Odo is the only one of his species that anyone has ever encountered, but that he was discovered near the mouth of the wormhole. So he wants to tag along to try to figure out where he came from and if there are any others of his kind. So that's going to be a big plot point moving forward. So I didn't want that to get lost there in all of the exposition. So you sort of you understand it now? I wish they'd made that a little clearer for you in the first
Yeah, I
go
mean, I
around.
understand the importance. I mean, then they reaffirm it later towards the end of the episode
Yeah.
what's going to be happening, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So at the beginning of Act 6, we have some baseball players and other people from Cisco's memory. They're trying to communicate with him. And they are saying that these people going through the wormhole are a threat to them. And Cisco tries to explain that he's not a threat, but also the very concept of linear time. So
this is what I wrote down. I was like, damn, first episode, let's discuss the very nature of linear time. That's like biting off. It's not just let's set up the chess pieces. It's let's play chess master and sit down. We're having a conversation. And through like sports metaphor, I've actually thought two things. One, his explanation is very intricate and not I don't think it's ham-fisted in any way, and it also sort of gets to and his performance here is so excellent in bringing a realization for himself before we even get to the emotional release, but just introducing the importance of, and you and many of our subscribers to the channel have said to me before, the whole thesis of the Star Trek universe really is that it's the unknown, because I think basically in this beat, the being is like, well, the concept of linear time sounds incredibly scary. Why would you want to, how could you exist? It seems incomprehensible you could exist with not knowing what was coming. And he says at one point, he's like, it's the unknown. It's the unknown that is the journey. And I thought that was sort of a great consolidation of the sort of whole thesis of the show, probably, as well as the larger universe. So I just thought, hell, another point where they were like, it's not just about putting money on the screen, right? They showed some balls. They had him go head to head with Picard, and now they're tackling huge sci-fi concepts. I like the gusto, baby.
Yeah, no, I do too, and I thought they did a really good job of like, how would you explain linear time to something that doesn't live in a linear fashion? And it was, like you said, super heady, super cool, super sci-fi, super Star Trek.
What I did find lacking, maybe you can throw your 2 cents in.
Yeah.
I found I couldn't understand why the being or the species, whatever, the orb thing, was felt attacked or felt endangered. Like it didn't really say, because clearly that's why we hadn't found the wormhole before, or they've been sort of elusive with the orbs and stuff. I didn't quite get it reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little murky, but that people going through the wormhole and causing chaos and bumping into stuff, they exist in this wormhole, right? So if you mess with the wormhole, you're messing with them, is what I took from that.
Mm-hmm.
But that and that people going through was causing damage. And what Cisco is saying is like, we're not doing it on purpose, right? We're not, like, let us figure out how to do it in a way that's not causing damage. And their point about linear time, why are they talking about it? Because they're like, well, how could you not know that you were causing damage? And it's like, well, I don't know what was going to happen. I don't know the answer before I ask the question. So anyway, lots more delving into that world as we go. But meanwhile, back on the station, Chief O'Brien, the brilliant engineer we all know him to be and will continue to, has a plan to move the station, because the station itself doesn't have really any engines. It doesn't have a warp drive. It's not designed to be moved. It's designed to be static. So all they have are a few little thrusters. But O'Brien has a plan to lower the mass of the station so it can move faster. It's a hard work on an old clunker, but it's O'Brien, so we know he's got this. Cool. Here we get into sort of the technobabble sci-fi concepts. Really cool. I as a kid loved the idea of like, oh, let's create some sort of a force field or whatever that lowers the mass of the station. So because it makes a little bit of sense. Meanwhile, Kira and the crew are in a race with Gul Dukat to get to the wormhole. Dukat has really great information, apparently. So
bad guys always do, Keith. Bad guys always do.
Bad guys always do.
That's every treasure hunt movie too. They're like, you find the secret chamber, whatnot, and then somehow the bad guy who had none of the information that you had gets there too.
Yeah, they know it. But the Cardassians and they have good intelligence capabilities, and that will be a thing moving forward. So Cisco keeps talking to the aliens and uses his wife's death and the trauma of that to explain linear time, because they don't understand the concept of death itself. Anyway, speaking of, before I go back, I love the visuals here of getting the thrusters and getting the sort of bubble there going. Looks really cool. Anyway, so yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick shout out, because I'll forget otherwise. The whole linear time, the whole huge chunk of this episode where he's communicating with the alien is such a directorial achievement, I think, because that was shot completely asynchronously. The director had to make sure the actors knew exactly what the through line was, and it's because it's shot on different locations with different actors, all communicating one consciousness and one idea. Right. And then you have to assemble it and make it coherent. That must have cost a gajillion dollars, taken so much time and planning. So I'm giving out laudits to so many people, because this pilot, I think, is an achievement.
Yeah,
for television, for sure.
No, it certainly is. So anyway, oh snap, the Cardassians showed up first, and they got in the wormhole and messed everything up. Of course, the wormhole snaps shut and disappears. And so that is the end of Act 6. And so we, of course, Dukat's in there causing trouble. And we go back to Cisco speaking with the wormhole aliens in Act 7. And they explain here what we talked about before. It turns out people are going into the wormhole, messes with the aliens. Cisco keeps trying to explain how it's like to navigate life in a linear timeline when you don't know the consequences of your actions before you do them. He uses the Chicago Cubs from the 30s to do it by way of a sports metaphor. They apparently could afford to rent a whole bunch of old-timey cars to be in the background, but not a stadium, apparently. There's an exploration in the nature of humanity, valuing the unknown. And back at the station, the Cardassians show up looking for Dukat, who went through the wormhole, and they don't believe it, blah, 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 surrender or die. This is where we find out that the station doesn't have any shields or much weaponry. So as Act 8 happens, they have called for help from the Enterprise to come rescue the situation, but they're 20 hours away. The Cardassians are there. They're causing trouble. We're about to have a pew-pew. Back in the wormhole, Cisco discovers, interestingly, he is trapped in his trauma. Because damn, these aliens should be my therapist. And damn, Avery Brooks is bringing it.
I wrote the same thing. I wrote the same thing down. I was like, wow, now they flipped it. He spent all this time talking about how we don't know what's about to happen and how we're moving forward perpetually. And they're like, oh, yeah, but about that, you stuck here.
Why are you stuck in the past?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, damn, what a great flip. And also, wow, we're talking about trauma and mental health. Okay, episode, not just the reality of linear time itself, but let's get into your mental shit, too. This is, like I said, big swings.
Big
Balls. That's the episode. That's it for me, Keith. That's my summation. The balls of this episode and the characters on it. Because meanwhile, our people back on the Deep Space Nine are gonna do a bluff, a huge bluff, with everybody's lives on the line.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I have to say, like, with Avery Brooks' moment of realization that he's trapped in this trauma, God, he is so. This is where like oh damn, like this guy has got it. And you know, and even as a child watching this, I was like, ooh, I get that. I get that, and it's profound, and it's a character defining moment, not only in the revelation that he's trapped in his trauma, but in his growth out of it, by learning from this experience. So anyway, as you said, back on the station, in our battle with the Cardassians, Kira bluffs the Cardassians, and O'Brien makes it look like they've got defenses. Turns out, don't play cards with Kira, because she's going to bluff the crap out of you, and has fixed her hair from the first half of the pilot.
Yeah, well, because she was doing some manual labor.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we get some great shots of the model of the ship here, and guess what? The battle begins anyway. Oh yeah, so here we have some shots of Avery Brooks working through his trauma here. Oh, he's so good. Yeah, we're, sometimes the screenshots get out of place here, but you can really
That's
see.
Right, yeah,
it's all right. So the battle begins anyway. Pew pew. Stuff starts to blow up, and the station itself is getting its ass kicked. And so we have some great sort of battle stuff. They shoot the only photon torpedoes they have as a bluff. Doesn't matter. They're going to start blowing stuff up. So what did you think about the sort of battle that happens here?
Well, the bluff I thought was cool, and I liked what it did for the Kira character and also everyone's respect for her. But it's also like we've seen that beat on every episode I've ever kind of seen. There's always we don't have enough guns. Like, what are we gonna do? Where do we divert power from to get enough power into the one thing to shoot the shooty? So
Right.
Not the most innovative beat, but still the money's there, and the battle goes on long enough for you to be like, oh shit, how are we gonna get out of this until we see the reveal of the wormhole reopening.
Yeah. I mean, what I liked about setting this up, and yes, look, there's always an element of space western with Star Trek here, but we've been on Next Gen on the flagship of the Federation. The Enterprise is the biggest, baddest, toughest ship out there. It's outmatches in a battle almost anything else in the galaxy. And they've got a bazillion photon torpedoes and blah, 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 blah. To have this giant station with almost no defenses whatsoever, I think adds an element to this. Like, they're pretty vulnerable. And it adds danger as an element here. We're right here next to Cardassian space. You got the bad guys there with all their ships and all their guns. And the ship, the space station looks big, but there's almost nothing. There's nothing there. It hasn't been built up. There's no defenses. So I think that's an interesting element here. Meanwhile, happily in this battle, Bashir gets to do something. He gets to do something other than hit on decks. He gets to do some doctoring. So that's helpful.
Put
and we
your
see
finger there. Press hard.
And we see some vulnerability from Odo.
Yeah, that was cool.
Is sort of out of his depth in this, and he doesn't know a great deal about medicine or anatomy because he's goo. So I think that was a nice little beat there. Kira, obviously, at this point, is forced to surrender. But wait! The wormhole opens, and out comes Cisco towing Ducat's ship, which is impressive considering the size of a runabout versus a Cardassian warship. But we're not worrying about scale. It's the pilot. We're not worrying about how far you can transport. Well, don't worry about it. And but I mean, that's a great shot. How cool is that? all of those visual effects. And Cisco comes back, and everybody is happy. The wormhole aliens basically disabled the Cardassian ship, gave it to Cisco, who took them out. We could have made that a little bit more clear.
A
But
lot happens up in that wormhole that we don't, that they just kind of like, they're like, okay, it's cool now. If that's the other thing, like, did he, what was the trigger? Like, they saw in him that he recognized his trauma, or did he just like get better and they're like, oh, okay, we fixed it, so now he can go? Like, that was a little murky for me.
no, I think, with the context of knowing the series, what he did in that interaction was effectively communicate to the wormhole aliens that uh this is what my deal is. Like, our species, linear time, we don't know the consequences of our actions. We have we this is how we operate in space and time, because it's hard to explain to somebody like something omnipotent with it is in all spaces and times at the same time. So he was able to effectively communicate what the deal was, but also, more importantly, effectively communicate that we're not trying to hurt you. Like, we're not trying to be a threat. We're good folks, right? And thus, being able to effectively communicate with these wormhole aliens fulfills the destiny of being the emissary, because he found the celestial temple and was able to communicate with the prophets, from the point of view of the Bajorans. And this is like a thing that's going to be a part of the whole series, right? Are they wormhole aliens or are they prophets? Is it a wormhole? Is it the celestial temple? The nature of science versus religion. It's going to be a whole thing going on here. But for now, that's what happens. Cisco comes
Open highway, wormholes open.
Wormholes open. Everybody's happy. The Enterprise shows up, and the Federation calls dibs on the wormhole because it's in Bajoran space. And now that the Federation is there, again, they're NATO. So the Cardassians aren't going to screw with NATO yet. They're not ready to do that. They just lost. And we have a final scene where Picard shows up in Cisco's office. And, in the previous scene between the two of them, Cisco's like, I don't know if I want this job. And in this case, after this journey that he's been on, all of a sudden, Cisco has a purpose again. Cisco feels like he knows why he's there and what he wants to accomplish. And is like, hey, remember when I didn't want the job? Please don't tell them that. And Picard's like, I didn't, because I'm Picard. I know how this works. We get that little moment, and we see little slices of life returning to normal. Of course, we see, Quark harassing Kira, and so on and so forth. We think, it's played for laughs because it's 1993, as opposed to, laying hands on a woman against her without her consent, which is not cool. So, what did you think about the conclusion of all of this, Mike?
Like I said, the machinations of as to what happens at the end in the wormhole there aren't particularly clear, but it doesn't really matter because you kind of went on the journey with them. Clearly, whatever lock needed to be unlocked, he unlocked it, which is the important thing. And also, there's a good bit of I think overall exposition where they're like, well, now the wormhole's open, and that just means it's going to be a highway now for exploration, for study, for research. So we need to look over it. So obviously the ongoing mission is established. The ongoing conflict with the Cardassians is established. And also, the team isn't at full kumbaya moments yet. So we know that there's some nation building inside of our own team that needs to take place. So great setup. I mean, exactly what you asked for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we've talked through the whole episode. Let's do our little after show and recap some of our fun stuff, starting off with Keith and Mike's favorite moments of Emissary Part 2. Mike, you go first this time.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's the whole linear time sequence for multiple reasons. One, just the swing alone, just the huge dense, obtuse concept that needs to be broken down, not only effectively for the character as a means of communication to this species, but also to us, the audience. It can't get too heavy. It has to be TV friendly. And I thought they knocked it out of the park. Additionally, as I mentioned, the way it's shot with the limited sort of effect ability they had is cool, but more for me, just the direction and the editing of putting all these shots together to make a streamlined bit of dialogue, because really that's what it is. It really feels intimate dialogue between one-on-one character, and it ends with the best emotional beat in the whole pilot, and really brings the relationship with the wife full circle, but also just the acknowledgement of personal trauma. I just think that whole sequence is the standout moment for me.
Yeah, well, I have two answers, right? Because I watched this in 1993 when I was 13, and then I watched
Underboob,
it.
Keith, are we going back to underboob?
That's true. That's true. I will preface this by if there's ever underboob, that automatically wins. Automatically
Okay,
wins.
fair, fair.
But underboob aside, when I was 13, I loved the bluff, right, and the battle, and I loved, Kira being a badass, and the sort of like, how can we trick them into thinking we have a bunch of guns and we don't, and like how cool that was, and the explosions and the battle, and they put a lot of effort into, they built that huge beautiful set, and then they fucked it up immediately by blowing stuff up. It was cool. I really liked that part. Today, in 2022, I'm with you, right? The exploration of linear time, but more than that, I want these wormhole aliens to be my therapist, because being stuck in trauma, right? Like, that's such a, it's obvious and yet incredibly well articulated and shown, and with Avery Brooks's performance in there, it's incredibly moving. I thought it did wonders for establishing the character, but also establishing, like you said, the big swings
Mhm,
on this show, that we're going to get into it, right? This is,
mhm.
Deep Space Nine's going to get into it, and it's going to be, they're going to get into the deep and dark sometimes, and in a way that the other series didn't as much, right? Next Gen certainly had some darker moments, but nothing like what this series is going to explore. And Voyager had some darker moments, but nothing like what this is going to, the journey that we're about to go on. So I really, really liked it. I found it moving. I continue to find it moving. I think it's just excellent. That moment is just excellent. So we have now watched the entire part 1 and part 2. It is time to give it a rating. Mike, out of 100, because out of 10 there's 176 episodes. If we're gonna really rate these, let's take it out of 100.
Okay. Wow. All right. Whoo! Out of
Yeah,
100.
really think it through. You have 175 more episodes to rank
Well,
this.
okay. Well, here are the things. I thought it looked like $1,000,000. I have questions. Are they gonna be able to keep up that type of look? Like, is it gonna
It
look
looked
that
like 12
expensive all the
million
time?
bucks.
Yeah, it looked really good. And what I really dug is the huge concepts are cool. I'm glad that's what I like about sci-fi, those kind of questions. So it's going to be great. I also like that coming in, I don't know a ton of the Star Trek lore, but they dabble in enough of it here. What's the nature of the Trill? What's the nature of this being? What's the nature of uh, where Odo came from? They dropped
Mhm.
enough little breadcrumbs where if you want to really get into the weeds with that, you can really nerd out on it and keep an eye open for all the lore. It's actually what I like about this episode and thus far about the series is it's very video. It's the stuff I like about video games, right? It's not the action twitch
Mhm.
moment to moment combat per se, which a lot of people love, cool, but it's more about the role play, right? Here are the characters. We're going to get some interesting dialogue. Yeah, a lot of babble, techno babble. You can get into it if you want and understand that stuff, or you don't have to. If you want to explore the weeds for the lore, you can do that. Or we're also going to give you a really pretty straightforward narrative with some choices and some questions. That's what you need to mainline, but you've got these other things here if you want. It doesn't force it down your throat. All that stuff's great. As far as so the world, dude, I'm in. Love it. As far as the plot goes, Charlie agrees.
Yeah, here's Charlie's making his first appearance on the show. He does not want to be on camera.
I think as far as a pilot goes is what I mean. Is
Yeah.
I like the characters, but more importantly, I have questions about all of them, right?
Mhm.
And I'm excited on that angle. I think they've shown such great design elements, character-wise, set-wise, color-wise, direction-wise. I like the way it's shot, so I'm invested there. And they sort of pitched a larger mission, right? They've established the world, and now the stories will take place atop it. So as far as achieving the things you want out of a pilot, I can't think of something better. I thought that they had a lot of ideas, and it seems like they heavily edited the episode so to make it fit within an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So some of it was a little uneven, especially I felt it was back heavy. The good stuff was in the back. The top, there were some clunkers in the beginning. All in, see, it's hard for me not to equate a number scale to like grade levels. This is an A, I think, for me. So I'm going to give it an 88. What just a number? We got to give it 88 somethings.
88 somethings. Yeah, I don't know. What are the somethings?
I don't know. Help us out. If we don't figure it out, what do you think down below? Let us know.
Yeah, leave a comment. We need a currency.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gold pressed latinum.
Well, are we calling these the KM the chemis?
The Kamemis?
The Kamemis.
Well, we would have if we were going to give out more awards, but we're not really giving out any awards
yet.
So,
you're right. Well, it's all going to come into place. It's a pilot, baby.
Look, it's our pilot too. We're going to be expanding and growing and adding lots of different nonsense.
Oh, I'm expanding. That's for sure. I am.
So you can literally see me expanding on camera. So 88. Yeah. Okay. So 88 currency
that feels very
to be
high.
named later.
It feels very high.
It feels high. I mean, there's definitely it's up there. Yeah. You know what? For me, I'm looking at this with hindsight. I'm looking at it with a view at 173 episodes, not 176, but a lot of episodes here. You know, and obviously this does not rise to the stratosphere of what Deep Space Nine can do, you know, by any stretch. But as a pilot, and for accomplishing what it needs to accomplish here, I think it's very successful. And you know, and look, not all the first couple of seasons are as successful as it comes out later. Hey, Charlie apparently wants to be the third host on this.
We're just two old guys sitting in our bedrooms. We can't hide
with our cats. That's like literally what's happening. But I think as a pilot goes, it was remarkable work. And does a lot of really good work. And a lot of a pilot is eating your vegetables and giving a ton of exposition and having to do it. And some characters were set up beautifully. Some characters weren't really. I think, you know, some of the look of it wasn't quite right yet. Some of the characterization.
I'll tell you what's right though. We talked about it last week. The sound of it, right? The sound. The sound world is great.
Yeah, well, you know, they know what they're doing. So I'm gonna give it 82.
Okay.
Whatever. So, you know, if rating it as a pilot, be a little higher than that. Rating it on as like an episode, I think it's an 82. I think it's a very solid, if not spectacular, debut for Deep Space Nine. So, before we go on to our last little segment, Mike, are you excited for the next 172 episodes?
I am. It sounds daunting. But
we've done it before.
We have done it before. But I am excited. I was excited really about midway through this pilot is when I started to get really excited. Because I was like, this show's not... I mean, obviously, you adore it, so I know that it's not a clunker. But I was invested, and as I can't stress this enough. As stupid as it sounds, I talk about it on the toy show all the time. I I'm starting to feel invited, which sometimes I haven't always felt because you're so
Yeah.
behind, right?
Yeah.
I started to feel invited, like this could be a show for me, and maybe the entry point that I've been looking for. So we'll see.
Yeah, into all of Trek. Now that's exciting. And I will say one last thing before Mike pitches next week's episode. Uh, Unlike a lot of shows, and unlike perhaps the other show that we're working on, Deep Space Nine gets better
Mm.
every season. So season 1 that we're about to get into is the worst season. And every season, subsequent season, gets markedly better. And I think that should be something to be excited about, right? By the time season 6 and 7 are going on, it's going to be, I can't believe, like you're going to be screaming at me to get to
I'm
the next
gonna turn
episode.
into a velociraptor.
You're
is
going
what-
to turn into a velociraptor. It's going to be so bear with the show
Okay.
at the beginning.
All
We're
right.
going to be laying some groundwork that's going to go in some unbelievably cool places.
Okay.
So, with that in mind, Mike, what's the next week's episode about?
I'm not gonna get crazy here yet because we haven't
Mhm.
really found. I haven't found the tone of this segment just yet. This is the first time we're doing it, but I will say that I expect next week we have to settle into our serial
Hey,
nature.
To be fair, this is Mike's imagination. Mike has not seen the next episode, and he knows exactly as much as he knows about Star Trek in
Yes,
general.
correct. I think we got to start establishing a freak of the week. Like we got to start getting a new baddie every week because that
Okay.
feels like the kind of show we're gonna need for like our A section of the show. So I think that starts next week. I don't think it's just gonna be the Cardassians all the time. We have to have cool, interesting bad guys and
Mhm.
conflict.
Yeah.
Next week though, the other thing I'm waiting for in Mike's imagination, Keith, is the stuff you hate. What are the flirty flirts? Because you know there's
Uh.
gonna be some flirty flirts. Like I think we gotta get that instantly. So I'm saying bad guys, weekly bad guys, flirty flirts, and
Okay.
also where's the bump, but we need comedy relief.
Okay.
So those are the three big I think chunks we're gonna start getting into next week.
Okay. So, well, if you're in the writer's room, you just pitched us elements. So next week we're gonna need a story.
We need a bad guy, a flirty flirt, and a comedy wink.
We should have some good acting. We should have some good sets. We should have a great story.
What do you think about space?
Yeah. We're starting to sound like Trump again. Let's have a great story. It's gonna be
Good
amazing.
space. It's gonna be the
Gonna have
most
an alien,
space
it's gonna be
evolved.
space, it's gonna be a space station. It's gonna be amazing. All right, folks. Thank you so much for watching our little Deep Space Nine review show. If you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, out of spite, leave us a rating and review and smash the notification bell. We're excited to see the conversation right down here below, to read everything that you write and try to respond to as much of it as we can. It's going to be really fun, and we're just beginning the journey. Don't worry, we're going to do it. We did 8 seasons of the practice, so don't you worry. We are actually going to
I
finish.
made 2 commitments in my life. To get
That's
married
true.
to my wife. I made a vow, and I've made now 2 blood oaths to Keith to watch all the episodes.
And you clearly spend more time online with me than you do with your wife. So there
I think
it
it's
is.
time.
On that little nugget, thank you for watching. This has been Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. We will see you next week.
Somebody find me an orb. I have some things I need to work through emotionally.
Thank you for watching KME Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe.